a lot of people talk about giving back. I think it's one of the most cliche things. But today's guest is actually doing the work. He's a senior software engineer at HashiCorp, and he's making software more secure in the places. And outside of work, he shares a similar passion to me, which is helping others grow into tech, serving on the board of Geeks. And I don't know what the last part is, but it's a group in San Antonio that's helped over 2,000 tech professionals. And they're doing things like resume reviews, student interview preps, AI showcases, and all of that. Welcome to the stream, Kedron.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So one of the first questions I always ask people when we get on the stream is like, why did you get into tech?
Yeah, so in high school, I had an intro to programming class, and we didn't actually even do any programming for the majority of the class. It was all a lot of logic-based things, but as one of the final projects, we learned just enough Python for me to build this little text-based zombie survival game. So you would type something in, and then it would be like, okay, before you see these weapons, do you take this one or that one? And you type in what you want. And then like next you see a hallway. Do you go this way or that way? You type it in. And I was like, people get paid to do this? What? Like, this is really cool. So from there, my school didn't offer any other classes like that, but I was still interested in it. So I landed an internship. From there, I just continued to learn and grow. And now I'm where I am today.
That is such an amazing story, and it's so funny that you said that because I put out a tweet yesterday where I said unpopular opinions, like these are the skills that people should learn in high school, and I talked about financial literacy, I talked about SQL, I talked about Python, and I talked about cybersecurity, because like the world that we're going into is kind of like going to be filled with all of these different things I just mentioned. That it's almost like malpractice not to start getting kids, even if not ready, but at least excited about those possibilities. And seeing as that played a big role in your journey, what do you think about my hot take?
Yeah, I think that it's really important for people to learn. There's this analogy that I like to use for like a car, right? Like you don't necessarily need to know how all of the like how the engine connects to the gas tank and how like all the different bits and pieces move, but like maybe you should know how to change your tire, you know? So I think that similarly, when it comes to coding and other like technologies like this, I think people should get a baseline understanding of this stuff so at least they understand what's happening somewhat in the background and have more power when it comes to the technologies that they use. But, like you don't have to know how a whole engine works. I don't think you need to know everything about Python and SQL and stuff like that, but an introduction definitely helps.
Hmm, hmm. So you studied computer science in college, right? How did this prepare you for your current job?
How did college prepare me for my current job? Um, so maybe a hot take, but I don't know that my college classes and stuff really helped me a ton. I think the part of college that really helped me was the connections that I made, the people that I met that I still talk to this day that have helped me out so much in my career. Whether it's just other students that I did like interview prep with and went through the trenches in terms of like applying to internships and stuff, or just the fact of being a student that gave me so many other opportunities for like internships, for example, that I don't think I would have been able to land, or at least not nearly as easily, and it already wasn't very easy, but it would have been even harder if I was not a student.
Hmm. And I think since we already are in a hot take territory, right? Maybe we should go all the way
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Let's go.
How do you believe like the education system needs to be disrupted? I have my thoughts, but I want to hear what you think.
I have my thoughts too. Um, oh man. So I think that there's a lot of different ways that this could be disrupted, right? And I'm going to keep this down to the scope for people interested in tech specifically. I think that there could be a lot more support for tech students, especially if you're not going to a school that's known for tech, right? Like maybe if you're at Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, there's like a lot of resources and stuff for you. But I went to school, University of Alabama, and there were some students that were putting some things together, but largely the school wasn't supporting us the way that we needed. For example, technical interview practice, right? That's a huge thing for anyone that wants to break into tech. It was largely all just like student-led, students like helping each other out. The university has their like career center, but their mock interviews, I went to it, it was like, so tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. And it's like, no one's actually asking you that in a real life interview. And if they are, I don't know if I actually want to work there. Like one of my coworkers was actually just talking about this the other day. Like, oh, if I ever had an interview like that, I'd flip it around during the question part. It's like, oh, what are your weaknesses? Because like clearly it's a good enough question to get signal and stuff on, which it's not. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways that universities could support students better for real world stuff, outside of just expecting classroom stuff to get them by.
You know, it's funny. I wonder if someone would say something like, if they ask what are your strengths or weaknesses, and say something like, $500,000. Like, if you offered me one right now, I wouldn't be able to say no.
Yeah. I mean, hey, there's a dollar amount for everybody. So I mean, you call it out. And
I can't, like, my weakness is I can't say no to money.
I'm gonna have to use that next time.
Oh my days. And it's so interesting, like just thinking about that whole space. Because I think 2 or 3 guests ago, Levi joined us. Amazing guy, by the way, and is still like an engineering student in college right now, or CS student. And he was talking about just like how, that experience in itself is not the most useful. And like the saddest part is like a lot of people go to school to get a CS degree, hoping that like that's going to translate directly into getting a software engineering job. But like if you don't layer that with all of the extra work, you're not going to get there,
Yeah, it's really tough. Yeah, just remaining just a little bit more in like hot take territory. So I went to the University of Alabama for about like 2-3 years, but I did not complete to get a degree there. A lot of the experience that I had was through internships that I was able to land through being a university student, and then through just a bunch of like events like hackathons, working on side projects, things that really built up my real world experience. Prior to this call, we were talking about like being a do as I say, not as I do kind of person. And I would tell and encourage everybody to finish out their schooling, get your degree, because it can take you places and get you opportunities that you would not be able to get otherwise. But if the sole reason is just to land a job in tech, like you're saying, there's so many other things that need to be done that I don't know that everybody knows going in, like the internships, the side projects, the work outside of just the school work that is super important for like being successful in this field.
I think you brought it back from hot take territory now, because you brought some balance to it, right? And I think I agree with it too, because I think before now, or not before now, like initially when I became, I don't want to say anti-college, but kind of like when I joined the movement, I was almost on that spectrum. But I realized that there's so much institutional power there, right? Like the handshake between many of these colleges and institutions and like the big companies that you want to work at, like it's so easy. And my eyes started to open, right? Like when I worked, I had a contract at Apple, and like I saw how many people there were going back to get their advanced degrees and MBAs and things like that. And that signaled to me, like, if you're already kind of like at the pinnacle when you're still doing all this work to get extra degrees, then it must mean something, right?
Yeah.
So if anybody has the opportunity to get a college degree anywhere, I'm not gonna be against it, even if it doesn't necessarily translate. But the plus is like you may even get an internship out of it because you're part of that system. That those are like recognized pathways that are there. But I think it also should not be something that holds you back, because there's so many alternative pathways now that allow you to be able to achieve those goals. And you have to do that work anyway, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if again, and I think that's where like it will be situation based, right? Like if you're a high school teacher who's maybe tired of doing that and it's considering tech,
Mhm.
would it help you out to go get a CS degree? I'd probably say maybe not, right? There might be other ways to do it, right? But if you're a 17-year-old trying to decide, should I go to college or, just go figure this out on my own, then maybe going to college might be the right answer based on your circumstance. But I just want it to be a bit more nuanced to where like people know like this different opportunities and pathways exist and like tailoring them to fit their specific goals and aspirations.
Yeah, absolutely. That institutional power that you were talking about is huge. That's how I got my first big internship, is because it was at Lockheed Martin, and their CEO went to Bama, and so it was a big target school. So literally, I went. They had a meeting where they're like, "Hey, this is Lockheed Martin. This is what we do. You should work for us this summer." And then when I went to talk to them, they're like, "So, like, what have you built? What do you know?" And I'm like, not much, but I'm interested in it. And they're like, hired. So I was like, cool. And like, if I didn't have that university behind me, that I could not do that. I had another friend who went to school in a different state and was applying several times to Lockheed, and was way more qualified than I was, and not able to get in. And so I think that, like, yeah, who you have behind you definitely can sway a lot of things.
Yeah, facts. And this is actually what I like, right? I think one of the high pitches that we give to people to come to listen to working in tech is like, I always say, like, it's not cutter answers off of ChatGPT. It's actually real people share real experience. So you're getting like the vibe. And if you're just joining us, welcome to the stream today. It's another Working in Tech episode. Um, if you're interested in software engineering or tech in general, I think this will be a great experience. We've been chatting for about 12 minutes now, so still a ways to go, but you've missed some, so you can always watch the replay to catch it up. This is streaming across YouTube, LinkedIn, and a few other places where you get your stream. Feel free to leave questions in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them, whether it's about tech, getting your first job, interviewing, resume, all of that stuff. But to kind of like switch gears a little bit, right? I think a lot of the work that you're doing, especially with helping people out, is very admirable. Why did you choose, or why was that an interest that you had?
So I've always been interested in community, giving back. Even growing up, I was part of like the church and AACS, which is the African American Cultural Society back in Palm Coast, Florida. Shout out! I'm not sure if anyone's listening from Palm Coast, but hey, and yeah, there was always that like emphasis of like giving back, right? Like getting your blessing and helping other people to get theirs too. And especially when getting into tech, that changed a lot for me, especially financially, that I was never able to do before. And now I see like, wow, I didn't expect to be in this position where I have so much like more flexibility and I'm able to take care of things. Like I'm not needing to stress about like bills and stuff and like, oh, like where's this going to come from or what am I going to do here? And so also understanding how that can change a single person's life, but also how that can really start to grow like generational wealth as well. It can change so much for people. And so I think just being able to help other people get their bag is really cool, and I definitely want to be a part of that. You know.
We're definitely going to be clipping this part, and you're speaking like literally my language right now, because the only reason why I started to make content was for that specific reason, to help drive the message. Like, one of the greatest things about tech that I've seen personally is just that transformational power.
Mhm.
One, and it's on many levels, just like you said, like you talked about personal and community. But I've seen, like, for example, even experiences, right? If we talked about doing a banking transaction 20 years ago, that meant that you walked into a literal physical uh, property, right? To go maybe hand a check to a teller or do something like that.
Mhm.
Now it's you log it into your mobile phone. There's so many things that you can't even, like, if you were born like 15 years ago, you can't even imagine like there was a different way to do it, right? Um, if you talk about, like, to use like Steve Jobs like favorite quote, right? If you talk about like a camera, a music player, a phone, 30 years ago that meant something different things,
Yeah.
right? Now you have communication apps, you have movie streaming services, like you have TV, you have even way more applications, right? On a
Mhm.
single device. And like the possibility has changed. So even our day-to-day experiences has completely been flipped just because of what technology can do. And from those, if we combine those three different things in terms of possibility, also, like, for example, you talk about, let's say, starting a business that has national reach, international reach.
Mhm.
If that was in 1995, that was probably you opening, like, stores in Tokyo and stuff like that. But now, from your mom's basement, you could literally start a business that's serving the whole world
Yeah, yeah, that's
just
true.
because of technology. So the transformational power is the reason, because I see it like, if you are coming from disadvantage, you need like accelerators, right?
Mhm.
And for me, technology is an accelerator on that infrastructure and, like, ability to do side. But then even the personal side, like, you don't even care about changing the world. You don't want to build an international business. I just want to get this money, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I feel like a
And
lot of people are in that boat.
and that's valid, because, to be honest, like, you would, I was having a conversation recently with someone. It's like, extreme poverty makes people do things that are not even human, right? Like, if you think about it, like, in the human experience, it doesn't make sense that somebody would do that. And so when you think about getting your bag up, like that would, because I said it this way, I'm like, there's a certain level of, people make things about billionaires like, oh, if they lose $10 million, they wouldn't go back to pick it because it's not this and that. But I think given that analogy can work for the average person. If, like, your net worth is now $1 million, right? Maybe if you lose $5 and you're running somewhere fast to get a better opportunity, maybe you don't even look back. It's like it just puts you at a different level where now you can think about giving back. Why? Because you've been blessed. It even puts you in a different mindset, right? Because, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy, initially, like, you're just worrying about, what am I going to eat tonight?
Yeah, 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 those needs. And then I
Then
don't remember the entire hierarchy. I know it's
it's
like
kind of like
finally
food,
needs, and
shelter,
then finally you're thinking about like
fulfillment.
parts and all that stuff to come.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And now you can start to think about how you're influencing the world around you, but it's only because your immediate needs are met, right? And for me, like, that's the thing. And as a society, I think as a community, we need that even more than anything else, right?
Mm.
To find ways to be able to lift people up using the tools that we have at our disposal. I know that was a little long-winded, but I'm
No,
sorry, you
that's
spoke
good.
my language.
Yeah, yeah, you're talking good. It's good, it's good. I feel like I'm learning just as much as I'd like to get to. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So you've had the opportunity to work at all these amazing companies like Goldman Sachs, CZI, HashiCorp, and things like that.
Mhm.
First of all, what does it take to get into those companies? I know you mentioned internships. What else?
Yeah. A lot of hard work, late nights studying. That's a big thing. I think also another thing is just connections with people, like being able to really get face to face. It's not always easy, it's not always accessible for people, but if it's possible, I definitely recommend that because that is infinitely better than just applying to the void and like maybe never hearing back from anything.
Mhm.
But yeah, I would say just really understanding where you want to be in terms of like tech is super broad, right? You could be front engineer, back end engineer. You can do AI ML. You can do game development. You can do like all sorts of different things. And so I think narrowing some of that stuff down and becoming somewhat of a like uh, subject matter expert can help you kind of level up through these different places. And it also kind of depends on where you're starting from too, right? Like if you're trying to get to a senior position somewhere versus if you're just trying to land your first internship, right? Like I think that there's varying levels of difficulty with both sides of things. And so there's different ways and strategies for like depending on where you're trying to go. Um, yeah. Yeah.
Mm. And that's very valid. So to kind of like go back to that point that you made about different pathways and how to get there, what would you say? Like, is there a framework for making those decisions? And I ask this question specifically because where a lot of people get tripped up on this journey, right, to into tech is even that first decision. Like, what do I do today? Somebody's talking about gov tech. Next tomorrow is about cybersecurity. Tomorrow is becoming a product manager. So what's the overwhelmed person's like guide to choosing a role in tech?
Yeah. So I think that one potential strategy is okay, out of all of these things that are interesting to me, let me pick one and just try to pursue that, see where it goes. Because out of all of my work experiences, I've like been at super small startups that have like max like 7 people, and then I've worked at like really big corporations, thousands of employees, different sectors too, education and finance and stuff like that. They were all like my favorite experience ever, you know? And I think that that's okay because I learned from that. And
Mm,
I think that in trying different things, even if you don't totally know what to expect, you can at
mm,
least give it a shot and learn more about, hey, I like this, I don't like this. Ooh, I'm really good at that. I'm not so great at this. And from there, it becomes a little bit easier to kind of shape what you want. Because at first,
mm,
it is super overwhelming. There's like a ton of options. What is it, like analysis paralysis, right? Like there's so many
mm,
different options and things you could do. I would just recommend like trying one and landing an opportunity that like works for you, whether
mm,
it's meeting people in person at your university, or if you're like coming from a boot camp, connecting with folks that are partnering with your boot camp. If
mm.
you're totally solo, finding a community first and then talking to people to understand what they do to figure out more about what you might be interested in.
Mm,
So yeah.
mm. That is really helpful. And I'm gonna put out this PSA real quick. So if you guys are just joining, I hope you're enjoying the conversation. Leave any questions you have in the chat below, and he'll be more than happy, I hope,
Yeah.
to answer them.
I've never been actually on like a YouTube channel. I've always wanted to point down and be like, yeah, comment
In
below,
the conversation.
subscribe, like and subscribe
So,
here.
don't worry, we'll drop it a few more times during the conversation just so
All
that
right.
we could do more of that.
Cool.
So I really like the way that you kind of like built that up and kind of like set it up. But I almost want to like be a bit more specific, right? Especially around because I think this is the fear uh almost to that point. It's like imagine that, I want to become a software engineer. Oh, I see all these things, and then software engineer is what I choose, but
Mm.
I'm not naturally like a technical person and I do it for like a week and then that breaks my spirit and I quit altogether. Like, what's the way to like not deal with that danger, for example?
Yeah. Number one is just giving yourself grace because this is hard. It's difficult. Like I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But I will say it is worth sticking through. So please don't give up. There were many times where I wanted to give up, especially when I was in college. I was applying for all these like internships. I saw on LinkedIn, all my friends and people I knew, like, I'm so excited to announce I just got this internship. Like, oh my gosh, guess what? I'm going to be working here this summer, blah, blah, blah. And here I am, like, struggling with these technical interviews. And I was like, you know what, maybe this is not for me. I'll just go into like business or communications or something, because this is tough. But I think what helped me to get through this is a few things. One, thinking about the end goal of like, okay, I want to do this because I really am going to be able to build this generational wealth. Looking at like, if you want to encourage yourself a little bit, go to some of these tech companies and just like look at the salaries and be like, ooh, okay, this is dope. If you're money motivated, or if you're motivated by like building really cool things, like maybe find some companies that are aligned with what you really like to build or technologies that you really like to use. The other thing that excited me was going to hackathons. It kind of, even if I didn't build anything, sometimes it could get a little discouraging if I like tried to build something and like didn't scope it well. I had this grand idea and I didn't get it finished in time. But seeing the thing that other people built and seeing what's possible was really cool. And I think that helped me, because especially if you're in a school setting, like these assignments and stuff, and like navigating linked lists and binary trees and stuff, that stuff was like, that did not give me joy. That was not fun. But going to a hackathon and seeing someone build this thing with AR, where it was like a DJ set, and they had these different these 9 squares displayed in front of them, and it would, depending on how they manipulated the square, would determine how the sound was played. So they could push it to turn on and off a sound. They could stretch it to make the sound go like really fast and stuff. They could squish it to make it like slow and low and everything. Like it was like, so they were just like, boom, boom, like it was like really cool. I was like, what? Like people build this stuff. And so even if it's not something that I particularly would like want to spend time building, it's super cool to just be in that space, in that community. And I would encourage that too. Just like find community of people that are really excited about this thing, because it can be easy to kind of feed off of that energy at times.
You said it like the best way possible. Like, and and I was gonna make a joke about like, I'm excited is the bane of everybody's existence.
Yeah.
I'm excited to announce.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like, especially when you're like, I've applied to 100 different places and like no one's gotten back to me. If I see one more LinkedIn post about like someone being excited to announce.
But I think you touch on like some really, really cool points that I almost don't want to get lost, right? Yes, in fact, 2 of them, right? One, if you ever get discouraged, go look at how much companies are playing, especially Netflix, okay? Go look at that. Let that get you excited. But I think the second one is just as important, because, in fact, no, it's 3 things. You're dropping so many gems. The second one is community. I think that's so important. And it's funny, we were talking about that just before this, right? Learning some of these ideas in abstract does not do justice to the ideas, right? Seeing how other people are using the technology, seeing how people are interacting with it is so exciting. And if you think about it, like to kind of like bring in a meme moment, right? Hashtag all this week was all the jazz. And then you see other people, right? The governor of New York is putting, bananas and Saratoga water on the table during whatever session she's at, right? There's, I've forgotten what his name is, this Southeast Asian man who's a comedian, right? He also had his own. Like there's so many creators. And I think the lesson to take from that is like, one technology might exist, but we can all add our own little flavor to it. In fact, I also did my own, so go check it out. But that's the point. It's like the technology is like the platform. What you choose to build with it is the whole magic. And to bring that back to a relatable experience is like, who would think, right, that people being able to schedule, when we can both have a meeting will be a $3 billion business opportunity. The technology to build it has probably been around for many years before it got built. But the person who built it saw a unique problem they wanted to solve. It was their problem, and they solved it better than any than anybody else could.
Mhm.
That's the magic of it. So it's like, even if somebody, we could even go further than that, right? Facebook wasn't the first, social media app, right? TikTok is not the first video app. Snapchat is. I know many people forget that now, but
Yeah.
you can always, even a technology, even a platform, even a system that has existed before, you can always add your own flavor to it and completely change the meaning of that. And I think because technology can be relatively cheap to build, I know, like, you got to consider the AWS costs and things like that can rack up quickly, but consider to the alternative, it can be cheaper to build. I think there's a real advantage there for people to be able to do the kind of things that excite them, because I think that gets you a lot farther, right? We both get excited talking about how, tech can provide you the financial platform to be able to achieve your dreams. And imagine if you're using technology to be able to solve that. You go straight into the middle of the night working without even really thinking about it. Why? Because you're solving something that's so peculiar to you. Like, you're bringing your dream alive. And I think that's another element to just kind of like bring that point home of the answer that you gave. It's like, this could mean a lot more, right, to you. And that way, you don't even really think about the pain of the learning. You think about like the beauty of what you're creating, and I think that's where the magic happens.
No, that's huge. I think that finding things that are exciting to you to build are is a really cool avenue for you to learn more. Because, for example, something that I started with was like a lot of web dev stuff, and so I would think like, okay, I want to be able to do this like cool it wasn't actually that cool in real life, but it was cool in my head at the time of having like this diagonal kind of scroll bar for this like band. They have this band that I really like. I was like building a website for their concerts and stuff because they didn't have anything yet. I actually reached out to them. I was like, oh, I want to build this. It didn't pan it out, but it was still a cool like way to build things, because I was like, all right, I don't actually know how to build this thing. Let me figure out how to do this thing that I need to do. Go on YouTube, Stack Overflow, whatever. All right, I figured out how to do this thing. And now that thing I either know how to do now for sure, or if I forget down the line, I know where to access that information more easily for next time. And by building things, you start to get your skill up a lot faster. And so if you're building something that's already cool to you, then like that's a bonus, you know?
Absolutely. I think you said it best. Build things that are cool to you, because that's a bonus for you in your learning journey. You're doing two things at once, essentially.
Mhm.
So since we've been talking about the bag, what's the earning potential for a software engineer?
The highest that I've seen, um, I want to say it's like 400,000, something like that. It's like the top of the like things out as I was like job searching and stuff. I have not gotten to that point yet, but I mean, hey, one day maybe. And yeah, you got to keep in mind also that like there's differences between like base salary versus like if you get bonuses versus if you get RSUs and stuff like that. There's a lot of different ways that you can like make money. But I feel like on average though, like across the country, because it also does really depend on where you're at. Um, I want to say it's like 90 to 150 is like pretty like general for at least in the spaces that I've been in terms of like web development, like backend engineering, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely is. So for people, 90 to 150K is kind of like the sweet spot, especially maybe if you're starting out new.
Mhm.
But to kind of like bring it back, because there's been a controversial topic that has been floating in the world, right? Oh, stop learning how to code. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. This whole concept of like vibe coding or using like LLMs and stuff to build everything for you. I think that it is great for prototyping. If you're trying to just get something spun up really quick and see how it is, awesome. If you're trying to build something sustainable long term, you have to know how to code. You can't rely on these LLMs. They have what they call hallucinations, which is just a really fancy way of saying that they get a lot of shit wrong. And so I think that you have to be mindful when using these tools to build out your code, because it's not going to be a matter of like, all right, let me prompt ChatGPT or whatever you want to use to build this thing for me. It's going to be you doing that plus doing whatever code review and making sure that you're able to maintain things in the future. Because if your idea does end up blowing up from whatever you make after prompting, then down the line you're going to have a lot of issues, or you're going to have to hire some people or something that actually do know how to code, because it doesn't always keep in mind all of the best like security practices and the ways that you can like kind of abstract things to scale as needed.
I agree with you 1,000% and maybe even a little more, right? Because I think a lot of people think in zero sum, right? And maybe there might be a day where technology is so just advanced where people don't even need to build software anymore. But I think the software engineer will be the last person to be impacted by that. Because even like people don't think about these things like I think sophisticatedly enough, if that's kind of like a word, right? Because the person who knows how to manipulate software today, right, as a software engineer, meaning that who has an edge if you're using software to get that advantage? It has to be the person who already knows how to build software. Plus, there's this whole entire world, right? Like API integrations, right? Like, code reviews, testing, debugging. Like, being a software engineer is not just writing a code and say, oh, this is it, right? There's an entire process. There's methodologies to it, right? There's entire like CI/CD pipelines. There's a whole process. And somebody already knows that, at least to a certain degree. So whatever opportunities exist, it's not going to be somebody walking off and coming from the street who's going to take that opportunity. It's going to probably be somebody who knows it. And I think the closest I could put to it is like, what's the word? Canva, right? Canva exists today. It's democratized design more than any other tool that existed in history because there's templates, there's opportunities. Are all graphic designers eliminated? I don't know what the numbers are, but I'll probably say there's probably as many graphic designers today as there were maybe 10, 15 years ago, because the opportunities around design have grown so much. We're consuming more social media just because there's many more of those things. There's many YouTubers who use graphics designers. And when you need precision, right, it's the skilled people who will give you that. Because if I think about that in like, let's say we take even design, let's use design, right? If Microsoft wants to put out, some designs around a program they're doing, is the GM going to go to an LLM and type it in and say, generate this thing for me?
Hope not.
It's still most likely going to be, maybe a designer will be doing it, right? Not a GM or a product manager or something, but it's like, you will still need people to do things, right? Ultimately, and I think that's why maybe that's not necessarily like, at least something to be worried about in the near future. And I think it's probably like the best time to become a software engineer. I'm almost kind of like flipping it around. It's like, there'll be so much new opportunities on the basis of what this technology can do that more people will be able to take advantage and ramp up quicker and build even more exciting things just because we can push the limits of what's possible.
Yeah, and I will say there is definitely a real skill in being able to prompt well, like prompt engineers and stuff. Because I think that definitely, to get it exactly what it is that you want, takes a certain skill of understanding like AI agent behavior and stuff like that, But I think that that's also different from just letting an LLM do your job as a software engineer, So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
So you've kind of like, I also want to know your thoughts, especially now, right, about job hopping, right?
Mhm.
Is it valid? Is it not? There's so many people who are struggling to find work right now, right? Is it still a valid thing? Because again, the conventional wisdom has always been like job hop every 3 years, and
Mhm.
you're gonna land in like the perfect opportunity. But what do you think about that?
I think it highly depends on your situation. Several years ago, I would have been like, yes, do it, because people were like bouncing around, getting higher salaries and stuff, and it was working out super well for them. Staying every like 2 to 3 years, like you were saying, that's enough to like have some things vest and stuff too. So you grab that, contribute what you can, and then you find the next opportunity. I think now I would say tentatively, just because things are way different now. It is definitely a tougher market today. There's so many layoffs and stuff that are happening. There's still some like hiring freezes out there. Now, that's not to say that it's like impossible to get a job. It's still very much possible. There's still so many people hiring, but it is just a different scene than it was a few years ago.
Mhm.
So I think that if like the opportunity presents itself to you to get a higher paying job, and it's also things that you um, will enjoy in the sense of like not just the work, because work is work, but like the culture and the environment and the work that you're doing is something that you can see yourself doing. That's I would say go for it, because although we've been talking about like getting your bag, like hey, people want to pay me. I'm not going to stop them. Um, but also at the same time, I don't know if I would take like a marginally higher salary for like a manager that I did not vibe with or something like that, because work takes up so much of our lives, and so being able to go into work and set things up in a way where you enjoy it as much as you can, because like I said, at the end of the day, work is still work. But if you have the like luxury to be able to kind of vet out your manager and stuff like that and your team, make sure that there's not like just a ton of like ego everywhere and it's hard to get anything done. I think that those things contribute to a good work environment and work life outside of just salary. Um, there are people out there though that like they got like a lot in their pockets, but they're just miserable going into work. And if that's your vibe, I'm not going to stop you, but I wouldn't encourage someone to go that route if they can help it.
It's funny, like that. I put out a similar tweet like maybe a short while ago, and it's around that same thing. It's like the almost like the perfect trifecta, right? Where you're paid well, and where you feel supported,
Mhm.
and where you feel like your ideas count, because it's such an important. Money's cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's even like a certain amount of money that you offer me that I work in a toxic
Uh,
environment. But I think just in terms of what's ideal, right? Like, I think ideally you want to work in a place where you're supported, where you feel like the culture is right, and where you feel like you can do your best work. Because
mm,
the amount of growth that happens in that kind of environment, and the um amount of like amazing work that you can do. Because again, at the end of the day, work is work. Like, we have to show up, we have to put in 8 hours, we have to do all of that. There's all 8 hours are not created equal, right? Like,
right.
there's some work that you notice even yourself like begrudgingly do, right? Because it's like I'm ticking off a box. But just like we said in the learning journey, right? If you're building something you truly care about, not necessarily because it's important, but like, maybe people are relying on you and they're supportive of you, and like they like to see you win. They clap for you when you win. They give you your flowers, not when your boss try to take credit for what you did, right? But literally like support you. It fuels you. It makes you want to do even more. And like being in that kind of environment, it's a plus.
Yeah, and you do. This is just echoing what you already said, but you do definitely grow so much more in those places, and it's easier to learn from people in those environments too, because they're willing to help you and guide you through these things. Like it's turns from a matter of like, um, oh, you don't know how to do this, or like, yeah, figure it out, to like, oh yeah, let me walk you through how to do this. Or if they don't have time, like, hey, here's some resources for you to learn. Let me know if you have any questions or something like that,
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
absolutely. So you've gone essentially from an intern to a senior engineer, right? How, what are these secrets to leveling up and getting that?
The secrets, the secrets. So I would say things to help you level up is one, becoming a subject matter expert on things. So if there's like either a piece of your code base or a certain service that your team owns or like something like that, learning everything there is about that one thing, because then you become the expert there and people start coming to you and trusting you for questions, advice, how does this thing work, stuff like that, and you become a lot more valuable to your team and company in general for that stuff. I think that's one really big way. I think another is just continuously like learning different things. I think being able to, um, dive into some like side projects if you're able to, or reading like some technical books, finding ways to level yourself up and level up the people around you. That is also something that will help excel you, because ideally if the manager is a good manager, they'll notice these things from you and help you to get to that next level because of the work that you're putting in there. So I think that those are some big ways. And then just understanding like what you're delivering and the importance of it and being able to communicate that. And if you notice that you're working on something that is just like busy work, um, like getting knocked out really quick and like identifying things that have business value, because once you can communicate those like numbers and metrics of like, oh yeah, like I made the company X amount of dollars this quarter because of my work in this, or I um, prevented these issues because I built this thing, or like if you can add some sort of quantitative value to the things that you're working on, then it's a lot harder for like leadership and stuff to be like, oh, well, they're not contributing as much, so we won't level them up, or we will like numbers don't lie, right? So once you have, unless you make them up, I guess, but don't do that. I don't recommend it. And so, yeah, I think that those are some ways to be able to level up.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about it, how important is networking in breaking into tech?
Huge, huge, huge. Oh my gosh. I got this job that I have now because of networking. I actually, not this most recent one in November, but the previous year was at Afrotech. At the time, I was laid off. It had been a few months. I was applying to the void. I got several interviews and stuff. Some of them went well, but just the offer wasn't exactly what I was hoping for. Some of them did not go well. It was my first season of doing any sort of like system design interviews. So that was a totally new thing for me. But this job that I got, I went to Afrotech. I met with the folks at the HashiCorp table. I talked to them, and things worked out where I was able to get in um, for this role that I applied for, the senior role. And what actually happened was I was a mid-level engineer when the layoff happened. Um, but I was like studying, reading about a bunch of things during the time that I was like laid off, and um, I got rejected off the bat when I applied. They're like, "Sorry, not enough years of experience," blah blah blah. But when I was talking to the people about like what I'd done, what I was interested in, like stuff like that, then they were like, "Okay, let me talk to so and so, the recruiter, to get you back in this loop." They're like, "Oh yeah, well, we actually have some other folks in the pipeline right now, so we can, I can introduce you to the manager, so you can do a discovery call, which basically means we get to learn a little bit more about you, you get to learn more about us, and we'll keep you in mind for the future. And so I did it, and she was like, yeah, let's get you in this interview loop. They're like, yeah, so we might down level this role for you to get it to a mid-level engineer, but if that's only if it works out and if we don't hire one of the other actual senior engineers that we're interviewing. I studied super hard for this thing. I ended up doing really well. I crushed it, and I was super proud of myself because this was like months and months of like doing interviews and bombing them, so I was kind of like learning as I was going from interview to interview to interview. So this one ended up being the one that really panned out for me. And yeah, they were like, hey, actually you did so well, we'll just give you the senior role. And so I've been here for a little over a year now. It was a year at the end of January. So
congratulations, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. None of this would have happened if I wasn't like there in person talking to those people at Afrotech. Like, I think that, like I said, just applying to the void, it's tough. But when you are able to have connections, people that you can really like vouch for you, and also friends that can like refer you and stuff, like that helps get your foot in the door a little bit quicker than just like LinkedIn quick apply. I don't know how effective that actually is.
And that's so like clutch what you just said, because it's like something I've always said: go to tech conferences. Like, a lot of all like the best practices at tech conferences, like community, people, potential networks, direct opportunities. Like, there's some things where you're not perfect for on paper, but you never do the job on paper. You're doing the job in person, even if it's virtual. Like, it's you versus the role, not this idea of a person on the paper. And papers lie, right? Or papers don't tell the full story.
Right.
Because you may not have, let's even say like this position is a people manager role, right? But let's say you've not even been a people manager, but you've had experience leading things at your church, or like you've learned a local community, or there's things where it just can't feature on your resume, but it comes across, even if you don't say it to me. When I ask you certain questions, I can see this person is a leader, because like everything I'm hearing them say, they're saying things about taking responsibility. They're literally bringing out leadership traits, even if they've not formally being a leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's too. But like recruiters are spending 8 seconds rather on a resume. They're not gonna see it. They're looking for like, is this brand name on there? Is this on there? Is that on there? When you go in person, when you have conversations in person, they see a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes everything. They see your experience. They're able to talk to you. Because literally, like, somebody cannot, ignore you. Or it's harder for someone to ignore you in person, unless like they're a super jerk. And that's different. They're gonna give you the time of day. You're gonna have the conversation. And then, I always have a funny way of saying it. It's like somebody's gonna mess up. Like, I see the system is like they're tight. They don't want to let me in, but somebody somewhere is gonna mess up. And the moment they messed up in your situation was just say, let them talk to you, because it's like, oh, bet.
Yeah, now I'm in there. Yeah, no, it's true. So like, I think that it's huge when you're able to get in front of people and tell them like what you're about, what you do, and how you can. I mean, honestly, just telling your experiences and stuff can even be enough for people to put the pieces together of like, oh wow, this person's really good at this, and that. I need this, and that. Like, that's perfect. That's, not every single networking opportunity is always going to pan out in an opportunity, but because there's plenty of people that I've talked to that great people, but it just hasn't, always like led somewhere. And so I think that it's similar to that question that you asked before of like, hey, like breaking into tech, learning how to code, it can be really tough and it can be really discouraging at times, but it's worth it. I think similarly with networking and putting yourself out there, like it's not always going to pan out. Sometimes it can be really difficult, especially if you're on the more like introverted side. Like it's like makes my stomach feel weird if I have to like go and like talk to too many people sometimes, but it can definitely be worth it, especially if you go in with like intention.
Yeah, going with intention. That's the key. So if you think about mentorship, which is kind of like closely tied to networking,
Hmm.
you've both been a mentee and a mentor.
Hmm.
So first of all, how important is that? That's kind of like part A. And then part B, what's kind of like the difference for you being on both sides of the spectrum?
That's a good question. So I think in terms of having a mentor, it's really huge because a lot of times that mentor will have a lot more experience in your field of whatever you're like going for, that can kind of guide you and inform you. They can talk about their experiences, things that have gone well for them, things that have not gone well for them, so that you can also learn from their mistakes. And also have somebody to root for you through this thing. We've talked a lot about the importance of community here. And your mentor is definitely part of your community. I think having someone like that in your corner to both guide you and root for you is huge. Um, I think on the flip side, it's been really cool because it's given me an opportunity to reflect, and mentees will ask different questions that now I feel like, oh yeah, totally, I know this thing, or like been there, done that. But realizing like, oh yeah, just however many years ago, I was asking those very same questions. Like I didn't know about this thing, and now like I've learned so much. So let me kind of give this knowledge back and help these folks out. And that's been a really cool thing, I think, especially because it's a lot easier to be hard on myself in things, especially when it comes to work or things I'm like not that are not quite clicking for me. I'm like, oh, like I should have done this better, or this should have worked out differently because I should have done X, Y, and Z. But taking time to celebrate your wins, big or small, is just as important. And I think through being a mentor, it helps you kind of do that in a way. I've been like, oh yeah, okay, not only have I helped this person, but I can see really how far I've come, and like I want to celebrate that for myself. And also you're helping someone out in their journey too, which is rewarding in itself. Seeing them grow and like take your advice and run with it. It's like uh, it's really cool. So definitely recommend it. If you got an opportunity to do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the kind of like to switch a bit more technical.
Mhm.
So you've worked across different stacks, Rails, Go, Terraform, TypeScript, tools, different things.
Mhm.
What do you think is the most important for someone new? Like, is it focusing on technology, or what's the right approach to build up technical skill?
I think getting the concepts down first, and worrying less about like syntax and stuff like that, because the syntax and how you do a thing is going to change across all these different like languages and frameworks and stuff that come out. But conceptually, if you know what to do, then you can kind of figure it out from there. So I think I would focus on that first. I guess it depends on like the level that they're already at. Like if you're starting super super fresh, then I mean even something like Code Academy could be helpful. But if you are already experienced with coding, but you just kind of want to like level up and learn more in terms of becoming like a mid-level or a senior or something like that, I think understanding more like patterns is really good, and understanding how to be idiomatic in the language that you are using, because there's like always many different ways to go about doing something, right? But there is usually a way that is particular to that language that's like cleaner, right? Like there's this concept of like what makes good code. I mean, anybody will give you different answers, but in my opinion, I think if readable and maintainable, then it's really strong code, because code should really be written for people, because people are going to be the ones messing with it and changing it over time and stuff like that, right? Like if you can get something written in that's usually like 5 lines into 1 line, like, okay, maybe that's like a neat trick, but no one can understand like what you're typing here, so it's like not actually that helpful. So I think that is another thing that I would learn if you're at that stage.
So it's that time again for us to do it. So
Oh
we're coming
yeah.
to the end of the conversation, so leave your questions in the comment below. And we do have one question.
Okay.
So it's from Daryl. He's asking, what's your day-to-day like, and are you sitting at your desk all day?
Yeah, I usually am sitting at my desk all day, but I switch it up from time to time. Like, there's a co-working space down the way. Sometimes I'll go, like, if it's a low to no meeting day, I'll go work out of a coffee shop or something. But I am mostly at my desk all day. It's not great in that regard. Um, but in terms of like the tasks of my day to day, it usually just looks like, working on whatever task I have. So, like coding something up, writing tests for it, doing code review, conducting interviews for other like software engineer candidates, and then meetings. It's like nothing super glamorous, but that's good for me though.
And I think the context here too, Daryl, to just your question, is that he's remote. So
Oh yes.
so
Yeah,
that's why he's at his desk all day. But
yeah,
if you work from an office, then it would mean that, like, because I remember, like, when I was in office, like, it would typically be like coffee chats, going to grab lunch, taking walks, maybe going to events on site, or things like that. But I
yeah,
guess one of the downsides of being remote is that, like, you're stuck to your screen or computer all day.
yeah. That's true. But I think that like outside of just typical work stuff, there's also some like community building stuff that I do. So I'm also like working on that outside of work, or like if there's events and stuff that I'm going to, whether they're like technical workshops or like little like networking mixers and stuff like that, I'll go to those as well. So that's usually not in the frame of like the 9 to 5, but it's like my day in general. That I usually have like, I'll say like 1 to 3 things a week usually, that I'm doing after work. So yeah.
And we're coming to the end again, so leave any questions below. But this is the final question. Imagine you were starting all over today. What's something that you know now that you wish you'd known earlier?
Ooh, great question. Um, Something that I wish I knew earlier. Um, Maybe how stocks worked. That would be really cool. Maybe I'd have a lot more money now. But besides that, from like a more practical aspect, um, I think just some of the advice that we like had talked about earlier, of not being too hard on yourself in this process. There were a lot of times I was like just kind of beating myself up and like being like, I need to switch, I need to change. This is not for me. Um, but um, I think trying to find some communities to point to be like, hey, like, yeah, this definitely is for you. And you can do this. Yes, it is very difficult. Yes, it's a lot of work, but you got this. You got this.
That is amazing. We have another question from Dario, by the way. It says, how long would it take someone to become a software engineer?
Ooh, yeah, that also heavily depends on what you want to do. But I know some people that have gone through um, like 6-month boot camps. That's just like uh, an example. I think it really depends on like the environment and stuff that you're in. Like if you're able to find a company or like a local startup or something that's willing to kind of take you in as like an intern and learn a bunch of stuff. I don't know what kind of field specifically Daryl you're kind of looking at, but I would say like give it 6 to 8 months of learning different things at like a minimum. It could take a little bit longer, but I think that 6 to 8 would give you proper time to kind of chunk the months into different concepts that you can learn and give yourself opportunities to like build stuff as you're learning as well.
I didn't quite get the name of the organization that you're.
Oh yeah, we talked about this. So, super brief history lesson. There's this meetup that my friend started a while ago called Geeks and Drinks. It was just a meetup. People would, hang out, and you'd be able to talk about work stuff. Other people can actually understand what you're talking about. But now we have transitioned from only doing the meetup to doing the meetup as well as more professional development opportunities, other social events. And so the rebrand is Geeks and, where the next part is whatever opportunity we need. We're collaborating with a lot more tech organizations here in town. We're looking at increasing our sponsorships. Shout out to, by the way, if you're interested, we'll talk. But yeah, it's essentially Geeks and whatever opportunity we need to fill in our community here. So Geeks and resumes, Geeks and we volunteer in San Antonio. Actually, this weekend we're doing the Car Fest as well. People are able to, who are in need of a car, are able to get it or have their cars fixed. There, a bunch of volunteers helping to do that together. So it's a very broad range of things that we have going on. But yeah.
That is so cool. So this is usually how we end it. We always give you a chance to shout out. I don't know if Geeks and is wanted to shout out, but if you have anyone else you wanted to shout out, please feel free. Or anything else, maybe you might have a new Netflix movie coming out that we don't know about yet, or a book.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hello again, world. My name is Kedron. I'm going to shout out Geeks and. We're doing a lot of really cool stuff here in the community in San Antonio. We've got an AI agent showcase coming up, and this coming month of April is AI April. I didn't come up with it. I just support it. But it's going to be a month-long hackathon and a series of workshops where you're going to be able to learn from the technical side about what AI agents are, how you're going to be able to build them, learn about the behavior side from one of our UTSA professors. You're going to get the policy side of things and a low-code, no-code side of things too, to be able to cater to anybody. And then we're ending with a showcase on May 10th. So reach out to me if you're curious to learn more. If you want to participate, if you're here in the Texas area, want to come down, or if you want to sponsor too, we're looking for partnerships. Yeah, in terms of the Netflix movie, stay tuned, maybe a few years. But yeah, for now, that's me.
Thank you so much. I want to say a huge thank you for coming and vibing and just sharing your invaluable experience. I really hope that all of the gems you've dropped has really helped people who are kind of like on their career journey, which is what this podcast is focused on. We're usually here every Thursday to bring you real life stories of people in tech, kind of like the challenges, the frustration sometimes, but a lot of wins. And I stress those first two parts because I think that the biggest danger that I see is like tech is often over glamorized without people really talking about the struggles. And what that then looks like is people try for 2 weeks or 1 month or 2 months and then get frustrated and quit altogether. Whereas, like, I think going into the belly of the beast, as we do on the Working in Tech podcast, kind of like shows you, right? Like, it's a lot of wins. It's worth it if you stick to it, but it can come with a lot of challenges. Okay, we do have one more questions before we close.
Okay,
but
yeah.
I promise I'll be the last one, or maybe not. It's our show. We can do
whatever
yeah. So, how many people that look like you in software engineering? That's a question.
Oh, Oh, Reginald. Not many at all. There's a I don't know the percent off the top of my head in tech, but it's a very low percentage, which I think was also something that was super discouraging to me. I know we're wrapping this up, but like super quick little story time. Um, when I was young, like maybe 8 years old, something like that, um, I dressed up as Spider-Man for Halloween. I went out to go trick or treating with one of my neighbor friends, and got a comment of like, "Oh, like you can't be Spider-Man. Spider-Man's not black." And I like laughed it off. Oh, haha! Like let's go get candy. We got candy, and then when I got home, I was like, "Dang! Like maybe he's right." I pulled the shirts out like my little fake muscles. I was like, "This isn't for me. Like I feel like a phony. I feel like this is weird." And I feel like there can be a similar sentiment in tech where like you don't see a lot of yourself represented. So it could very easily feel like, oh, like this is not for me. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm kind of like a phony in this field. But I absolutely guarantee you and assure you that you are not. There are many of us out there. It's just the percentage compared to the rest of the field is low. But there's a lot of communities out there. Just to shout out just a few, there's one called Algorithms. It's a Facebook group that's really dope. They talk about all kinds of different things. They have speakers come in, stuff like that.
I'm gonna jump in here real quick. I think the group is led by SA. SA, I've been
Yeah,
trying to get you for the longest time. Come to the
yeah. You should
podcast.
if you're listening. You should come, 'cause I think you work at Airbnb, right?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
If anybody watching knows SA, tell him we want him on the podcast. Well, sorry, but
Yeah, for sure. I'll message him on LinkedIn after this. I think we're connected, maybe, hopefully. And then yeah, so really dope group. Also, if you're able to go, Afrotech will like change your world perspective. Like it is such a dope conference. Everything is like led by us and done by us, and it's a beautiful thing. It's so much fun, and you learn so much, and that networking piece is there as well. Um, and keep in mind, I want to say that there's something on their website, but if not, I think there's something somewhere, like a draft letter that you can send to your company to have them sponsor you to go, so that it doesn't have to be an out-of-pocket cost. Because I know that it can be pricey, not just the ticket price, but also needing to go to get a hotel and flight. Like it's a lot put together. So if you can get someone else to pay for that and let you go, definitely make that happen. There's sponsorships as well out there. Different companies, like I think Google hosts some sponsorships. Like there's opportunities out there for sure.
And the one last one I'll add, because again, given the assumption that like many people may not even already be working in tech, so they may not have companies to sponsor them. Another key one I always share is volunteering. See, it gets you in a room, right? And you get around the energy, because I think just like you said, right, being in that energy is so important. You know, a lot of times what we have to do is to convince ourselves. There's somebody who's not everybody's favorite person, so I won't mention the person's name, but they were talking about something that I thought was so key. It's saying they had a friend who was a business person, right? And this person would always figure out a way to fly business class, because they mentally figured like that's where they wanted to be, right? In
Wow,
their
dude,
business.
that sounds nice.
It's not right. It's not everybody should probably follow that method, because you might go bankrupt really quick. But they knew that that's what they needed to be successful, and they created that energy of success around them, and it helped them be successful. In this case, you don't even have to fake it. Just being in the room, being around people, because again, if you're in the conversations every day of like, where's the next meal coming from, who's hiring for this $15 an hour job or $13 or whatever the case may be, it's hard sometimes to break away from that mental reality. So being in a room where people are speaking about more just changes your perspective. And it's like, the great Muhammad Ali said it. It said, I said I was the greatest, even before I knew I was. I think there's such a big power in like working back from a vision. So you're here, but where you really want to be is here. sometimes it's not sometimes, it's impossible for you to ever get here if you can't even see what it looks like up there, right? So a lot of times it's like just beaming back, right? Like it's like, and then you see a lot of people. You imagine going to Afrotech and like, let's say you stutter and you see people who are in tech who stutter, or you have some other like fear. And then the more you're able to identify with people who even have the similar challenges that you did, or you're a teacher and you're like, no, I can't code. And then you go there and you meet 5 teachers who've transitioned into tech. It takes it away from being something that you think you can do to something that is being done, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that's a difference, because you see that like you're not even paving the way, you're not doing anything, extraordinary. Like people done this, and then you can take the framework, you can take the learning, and then start to apply it, which means like you no longer have to reinvent the wheel. And I think that piece is very key, because without electricity, we don't get AI, right? Like it might seem very different, but it's true. The fact that somebody did something, so you had electricity, then you could have televisions, then you could have televisions, then you could have computers, then you could have computers, then you could have this, then you could have supercomputers, then you could have mobile phones that are computers, right? So you go layer by layer, like the next generation who comes don't even deal with that complexity because it's being solved for. And now you could go build our next thing, right? Recently, like ChatGPT had the new AI that could make images, but you only get that because you had the first ChatGPT who could write text. So we always have to kind of like layer, and I think that's what those things serve to do. Is like, just like Kedron was saying, like you need to see that it's possible. You need to see being in the room. So go volunteer. That's another cheat code, and that one costs nothing.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. You're just dropping a lot of them today too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's been the show for tonight. I think we covered all the questions. Join us next week. Going to have another amazing guest talking about another amazing topic. If you wanted to become a software engineer, I think Kedron has dropped a lot of actionable points about how you do it. Next week, another Working in Tech with a different expert. You don't want to miss it. We'll see you